Most sales reps think that they lose deals because their scripts aren't good enough, but the real deal breaker is in their tone and delivery. At Prospio, we've analyzed thousands of sales calls and we've seen it time and time again. Prospects didn't buy because of what you said, they didn't buy because of how you said it. I'm Kevin from Prospio, and in this video, you'll learn the biggest tonality mistakes that reps often make, the common factors of a successful sales call, and the 7 tones you need to master if you want to start closing more deals. Let's dive in. Your tonality is the number one factor you can improve if you want to increase your closing rates. The tone of your voice, how you say certain sentences, how you ask certain questions, how you emphasize certain words. The way you communicate with your prospects is how they can see, connect, and build trust with you. Words alone won't get them to open up and show their emotions, which is why tonality and delivery is so important. A lot of times when we analyze why a deal hasn't closed, I notice that it has to do with the energy of the rep's voice and their body language and their level of conviction, and not necessarily the words that they're saying. So let's go over some of the biggest tonality mistakes that's probably costing you money as well. The first mistake is sounding over enthusiastic. Prospects are smart and they can recognize patterns. So if you sound like every other salesperson with a high up tone and you say, "Hey John, it's Kevin from Prospio. How are you doing today?" almost like you're excited to speak with them, they can smell that commission breath from a mile away and instantly their guard is up. So think about it. When you go to a doctor's appointment, they're not excited to see you. No, they're there to do your checkup, ask you a few questions, and maybe diagnose you with a problem so that they can prescribe a solution. So they're more authoritative and assertive when they're talking and having a conversation with you. So if you're the expert salesman, you shouldn't sound overly excited to speak with your prospect because they can sense that you're desperate for the sale. The second mistake is using no facial expressions and sounding too monotone. You don't want to be over enthusiastic with a high tone of voice, but you also don't want to appear uninterested with a flat delivery. You kind of want to find the right balance of somewhere in the middle. So a monotone voice with zero facial expressions would be something like, "So how exactly do you want to grow your business?" Again, the prospect thinks I'm not interested in what they have to say, and they'll give a vague answer because there's no reason for them to open up to me. But if I ask it like, "So how exactly then do you plan on growing your business?" And you notice how I'm raising my eyebrows and I'm using my hand gestures, and it shows that I'm genuinely curious in having that conversation. So this is where they're more likely to tell me what's actually going on. Early in my career, I was at an event and the guy sitting across from me, he looks at me and he goes, "Why do you look so angry?" What? I'm not angry. But then I realized it's because I show zero facial expressions, which some people, when they look at me and I'm just resting there, they can perceive it as I'm being annoyed or angry. When in reality, I'm just doing nothing. I'm just sitting there listening. But ever since then, I'm more mindful of using my facial expressions to show that I'm actively listening and not just having a static face. The third mistake is listening to respond. This is where the prospect says something and then the SDR goes, got it, gotcha, awesome, I see. And then they just ask the next question on their script. And they're not listening with the intent of listening. They're listening with the intent to ask the next question on their script. And this might seem harmless at first, but it sounds super unnatural to the prospect and it just sounds so scripted, like you're talking to a robot. Like if you don't talk to your friends and family in conversations like that, if you talk to a prospect like that, they're gonna give you vague answers. Which leads me to the fourth mistake, which is mindless mirroring, which is basically recapping what the prospect is saying for no good reason at all. For example, if the prospect says, "Yeah, I haven't met my quota for the past 6 months," and the SDR responds with, "Oh, so what I'm hearing is you haven't met your quota for the past 6 months." Well, no shit. They literally just said that. And it's a common misconception that you have to repeat back what they said to you just to show that you're actively listening. But when you mirror a prospect, it has to serve a specific purpose, like getting them to expand or clarify. So if they say, "Yeah, I've just been super stressed out about this," and you respond with, "Stressed out?" with more of a curious tone, now they're going to expand on that and tell you exactly why they're stressed. But we'll talk more about how and when to use a curious tone later. So now let me show you the 4 verbal cues that all the top closers use in their sales calls. First is knowing when to emphasize certain words. The emphasis you put on different words completely changes the response you get. For example, I can say, "Why is that important to you now though?" Or I can say, "Why is that important to you now though?" The first version, it emphasizes now, which gets them talking about the timing. And the second version emphasizes the word you, which gets them talking about themselves personally. This is the exact same question, exact same words, but different responses based on the word that you choose to emphasize. Next, we have verbal pacing and intentional pauses. And I got this concept from Jeremy Minor, and this is where you would intentionally pace out and pause at different parts of asking a question. And this gives the prospect time to think about the response and feel the weight of the question being asked. And typically, you can use pauses to emphasize the importance of what you're about to say next. For example, if I asked, David, so tell me, what happens then if you keep losing $50,000 a month to all these objections then? How does that affect your performance review? Notice how the pauses forces them to visualize the pain and the consequences of not taking action. So he'll likely respond with some deeper answer like, yeah, I can't continue doing that. I need to provide for my family. Whereas if I just ask the question fast, like, so what happens if you just keep losing 50,000 to all these objections? He's just going to give me a quick surface level answer just as fast. Something like, I don't know, I'll just figure it out. So intentionally pausing when you're asking questions gets the prospect to think deeper before giving you a response. Next is knowing when to use upward versus downward inflection. So going more of an uptone at the end of your sentence shows curiosity, whereas on the flip side, going more of a downtone shows genuine concern or assertiveness. So I would use upward inflection when you're exploring and you want to get more details, you want them to open up more, and use downward inflection when you need to show concern or be more direct with them. And lastly, top closers use what's called backchanneling. This is where you would interject with subtle responses while they're talking, things like, yeah, oh, I see, uh-huh. Oh, interesting. And you would do this every like 7 to 10 seconds if you really want to be technical about it, and not every 2 to 3 seconds because it can get annoying. And what this does is it makes the conversation feel a lot more natural and not too scripted. When you're having a conversation, you want to make it seem like you're actively listening and you're actually engaged, like you're intrigued about what they're telling you. Again, do this every like 7 to 10 seconds, even longer, experiment, just whatever sounds natural. I need to address one thing to all the reps that say scripts don't work. All movies are based off of scripts. All the actors, all the cast members, they're all using scripts. But it's not about the scripts itself that makes the movie. It's about how they deliver those lines that conveys some type of emotions from the person that's watching it or hearing it. In your case, if you are writing a script, you have to deliver it in a way that gets the prospect to feel some type of emotions. Most scripts are written horribly because it looks too dull and too polished. There's like no personality to it. So the best way I would recommend to level up your scripts is by noting down how exactly you're going to say each line. For example, you can bold certain words that you want to emphasize, or put 3 dots to indicate intentional pauses, or even color code certain parts to show the tonality that you should be speaking with. Again, these are just some examples, but I would tweak your script to your personality and how you would naturally say things so that the script no longer feels like a script. It feels like how you would just have a normal conversation with a friend or colleague. So with that being said, let's go over the 7 tones you need to master on your sales calls. First is the curious tone. This is probably the most common tone you'll use throughout the entire sales call. So I like to describe this more of a roller coaster where you can start with an upward tone, then you move to a downward tone, and then you end off with an upward tone again. So it will sound something like this. Oh, interesting. So it sounds like you're already crushing your sales then? So you would use a curious tone if you want the prospects to expand and give you more information, and your facial expressions should show that you're genuinely interested in what they're about to say. Second, we have the playful tone, and this tone lowers the prospect's guard, and this is a good way to break any tension there currently is. So you can use things like strategic humor or poke subtle jokes at yourself just to make them laugh or smile. I like to use this tone typically at the start of my sales call to kind of break the ice. So for example, I could say, all right, John, so do you want to talk about the weather or you want to get straight to business? And make sure when you're delivering this tone, obviously your facial expressions has to match that. Like you're smirking a little bit, you're smiling, and you're not just saying, yeah, so you want to talk about the weather or just get straight to business? Again, that's the most important thing. Facial expressions and tonality and your delivery goes hand in hand. There's also other appropriate instances where a playful tone can be helpful too, like handling certain objections, preventing objections even, or even to build rapport throughout the entire call. So another example is when the prospect joins the call and their camera is off, one way I would use a playful tone is I would say something along the lines of, hey John, can you hear me? Can you see me okay? All right, yeah, you can? Cool. Yeah, I can hear you okay, but I don't see your webcam. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, You're just not waking up, are you? And this is where prospects would typically turn on their camera and tell me, yeah, I'm just camera shy or whatever the case may be, but at least now they have their camera on. Next, we have the confused tone, and this is where it gets prospects to expand on any emotional or trigger words that they have just told you. So when you're using a confused tone, you want to make sure when it comes to your delivery, you're bringing your eyebrows together and you're tilting your head slightly, and you're slowing down when you're asking the question. And I like to also include what's called intentional stuttering, where it shows that I'm not just reading off a script. For example, if a prospect tells me, oh yeah, it's complicated, I'll respond with, wait, hold on. Oh, sorry, what exactly do you mean when you say it's complicated? Again, you're confused. It's like you need more clarity on their answer. Next, we have the challenging or skeptical tone. So this type of tone, you can really only use this once you've actually built rapport and credibility with the prospect. So usually about a little bit halfway through the call, this is where prospects usually give you some type of pushbacks or tell you their limiting beliefs. That's when I would use more of a challenging tone. And you don't necessarily want to argue with them. It's more of asking this with a softer tone to get them to try to justify their actions. So for example, I could ask, so what happens then if you don't solve this? And then there's also the skeptical tone, which is a variation of the challenging tone. And this is where if you want to plant a seed of doubt in their mind, and this is where you would start with an uptone, but you end with a downtone. So for example, oh, and they're still making you do that manually. Or another example is if you're trying to find a problem, but the prospect is being too vague, you can lean out and use a skeptical tone by asking, yeah, it sounds like you're crushing it so far. So what has you looking at other options rather than just continue what's working? So now the prospect is thinking to themselves that there might be a problem with how they're doing things. Next, we have the concerned tone. This tone builds massive trust because they feel like you genuinely care and that you're on the same team as them. So here you'll use more of a softer and empathetic voice, a downward tone, and the goal here is to get the prospect to open up to tell you exactly what's going on. For example, wow, I'm sorry to hear that. How long has that been going on for? Or if the prospect is still not opening up, I can ask something like, can I ask you something, John? And this is just gonna stay between us, like off the record. What's really holding you back? And before anyone says, yeah, the concerned tone, I don't really see the use of it. If you're selling a product that can solve a problem that your prospect has, and you're not being concerned that they're not moving forward, then you're doing them a disservice by letting them walk away from the sale. You have an obligation as a sales rep to close your prospects because that's the only way they're going to get rid of this problem. You have the solution for it. So if they're not moving forward, you should be concerned. And your prospects need to see that you genuinely care and you're not like every other salesperson that treats them like a lead or a prospect. Treat them as human, show empathy, be concerned because you genuinely want what's best for them. Next, we have the nurturing tonality. So you would use this when prospects are being a little bit standoffish and they won't open up about their pain. And I would use this tone and share a vulnerable story just so that they're more likely to open up. So for example, David, when I lost my job and I needed to make money, I used to be in your shoes and I would read all the books, watch all the videos. And it wasn't until I looked at my bank account to realize that I'm broke and I have a son on the way. I need to make a change. I was 2 months shy from getting evicted. So I knew that I can't afford to give up on his future. And that's when it clicked. Like I decided to go all in on myself because I knew that that's the only way I can give my son the life that I never had. And I just want to ask you, what's your reason for doing this? So when you're sharing your vulnerable story with a nurturing tone, you're kind of telling the prospect, hey, I used to be in your shoes. I've been in your position. I know what it feels like. It feels relatable, right? It feels like you get them, you understand them, and you're nurturing them to take the steps that you did to be in the position that you are now. And that's ultimately where they want to be. So when you share that vulnerable side of you, they're more likely to also share that vulnerable side of them. And lastly, the assertive tone. And with this tone, you need to be super direct to cut through the noise. At this point, you've already tried all the other tonalities and nothing's worked. And now you have to ask for a straight up honest answer. For example, if you're dealing with a vague prospect, you can ask them, are you always this vague? What's going on? Again, you're being assertive and you're not being aggressive. You're not trying to pick a fight with them. You're just really trying to understand why they're being so vague. That's the bottom line. And if the prospect comes back and says, well, what do you mean? I'm just answering your questions. Then this is where you can hit them with, yeah, I'm just trying to understand what your challenges are, but all I'm hearing is I want to make more money and nothing else. Look, if we don't understand what's really going on, there's nothing I can do that can help you. And if it's something I said, or if you're not sure whether or not we're the right fit, I'd rather have you tell me so that we can have a more productive conversation. So again, you're not going to hurt my feelings, but what's really going on? And that's when prospects will open up like 90% of the time and give you that answer that you're looking for. If not, then that prospect's probably not a good fit. And it's time to reevaluate your source of leads. So you have to know when to be assertive in your sales calls. Otherwise, you're just going to let prospects walk all over you. They're going to give you vague answers, and if you don't address it, then you're never going to close more deals. And one thing about being assertive is that most sales reps think that it's too confrontational, when the truth is, being assertive is what helps you control the conversation. And trust me, if you can be assertive and get the answer and find out that the prospect's not a right fit sooner than later, it's going to save you so much time that you can be investing in the right prospect that actually needs your solution. So again, you have to be willing to ask direct and uncomfortable questions with an assertive tone to your prospects, because that's the only way you're going to grow as a sales rep. And there you have it. Those are the 7 tones you need to master if you want to get better at sales. And I recommend role-playing with your colleagues and practice this by incorporating this into your real conversations. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. And prospects, they buy from people they trust. And trust comes from feeling like you actually care about solving their problems. And prospects, they can sense whether or not you care based on your tonality, not necessarily the words that you're saying. So remember, the reps who close the most deals aren't the ones with the best scripts. They're the ones who deliver those scripts like they're real conversations. If you got value from this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more proven sales strategies, and I'll see you in the next one.